Hello, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we sneak between myths through frost-laced forests and smoke-smeared temples into a moment that never officially happened, but probably should have. A conversation between two immortals who gave humanity gifts they weren't supposed to, and got seriously punished for it. One with a raven on each shoulder. One with an eagle gnawing at his liver. Unless, of course, you happen to be on good terms with both world trees and mountain chains, because otherwise you probably won't survive this story. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. The ravens like to know. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You follow a single black feather across the wind. It spins and flutters slower than time, lighter than judgment. It lands on an ancient stone, half frozen, half scorched, and there in the softest place between Norse frost and Greek flame, you find two shadows sitting beside a flickering fire. Odin, Prometheus. Neither looks surprised to see the other. This is the kind of moment that's been waiting since the beginning two troublemakers who broke divine law because they liked humans too much. Or maybe just enough. A raven watches from a crooked pine. An eagle glides high above the cliffs. You crouch beside the fire. You don't speak. You don't need to. Their stories unfold without words. The first voice is wind against bone. It hums through runes carved into a staff. The second is ash in your teeth. A dry crackle that smells faintly of flint. One of them whispers, "They still talk about us, don't they?" And so we begin. Let's rewind. A mythological fact. Odin, chief of the Norse gods, was accompanied by two ravens, Hugin and Munin, whose names mean thought and memory. Every day they flew across the world bringing him news. In this way, Odin didn't just see the world, he remembered it, and thought it at the same time. Across the mythic divide, Prometheus stands alone on a jagged Greek peak. A titan older than the Olympians, once a friend of Zeus until he stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. For this, he was chained to a mountain where an eagle eats his liver every day. It grows back. The bird returns every single day. A quirky cultural parallel. One god sends birds out to gather knowledge. The other is punished by one that never leaves him alone. Odin uses birds. Prometheus is haunted by one. You imagine the scene. Prometheus shifts on his stone perch, eyeing Odin with mild irritation. "At least your birds report back," he mutters. "Mine just shows up hungry." Odin shrugs. "They don't always come back," he says. "Some mornings I wonder if they've finally gotten bored of me." The fire crackles. You lean in closer. This isn't just a fireside chat. It's a shared sentence, two immortals bound not by chains or staves, but by the choice to give something away. Wisdom, fire, memory, hope, and knowledge that wasn't supposed to be shared. A scholarly theory in comparative mythology proposes that Odin and Prometheus represent an archetype, the ambivalent giver. Not tricksters exactly, but gods who bend rules and suffer for it, not because they're wicked, but because they refuse to hoard what might help the fragile humans below. You look at them again. They're not heroes. They're not villains. They're just tired. Tired of watching people repeat the same mistakes with the very tools they risked eternity to provide. Tired of being told they shouldn't have helped. You wonder what they'd say to each other if myth allowed it. Prometheus might ask, "Was it worth it?" And Odin might reply, "You'd do it again, wouldn't you?" And Prometheus would nod, because so would Odin. Above the eagle circles once more. In the trees, a raven clicks its beak. And somewhere across time, fire flickers, and a rune is carved. The story has started. And the gods, well, they've been waiting for you. The raven on the pine tree shifts its weight, head tilted just enough to look like it knows things it hasn't been asked. You follow its gaze not toward Odin, not toward the fire, but skyward, into a place where feathers glide through thought and memory like ink through parchment. Because tonight, we fly with Hugin and Munin Odin's feathered scouts across the 9 worlds and back again, carrying secrets, spying on mortals, and occasionally forgetting to return. You feel your feet lift off the ground, not metaphorically. The snow below vanishes. You're seeing through black wings now. The beat of air against feather. The curve of the world tree's branches stretching across dimensions. You are thought. You are memory. You are raven. A mythological fact. Hugin from Old Norse Hugr thought, and Munin from Mini memory are Odin's 2 ravens. Each morning they fly across the realms gathering knowledge and returning by dinner to whisper all they've learned into Odin's ears. In the grim Nismal, Odin confesses a fear that one or both may not come back. He fears most for Munin, for memory is more fragile than thought. You drift over Midgard, over frost giants, and human hearths past rune stones and frost-bitten dreams. Somewhere a woman whispers a prayer to a god who no longer answers. Somewhere else, a child carves a face into a wooden stick and leaves it at the edge of a lake. And far above them all you remember, because that's what Munin does. A quirky cultural detail. In some Scandinavian traditions, ravens were believed to carry messages from the dead appearing after funerals or circling battlefields. They weren't just omens. They were editors arriving to make sure the story stayed intact. You return to Odin now, perched on his shoulder. He doesn't flinch. He just nods and stares toward the horizon as if he's been expecting bad news all day. You whisper to him what you saw. You speak without words. Of hunger. Of sacrifice. Of fire stolen from 2 bright gods. You mention Prometheus, still chained, still bleeding. Odin doesn't respond. But something in his eye, yes, just the one, shifts slightly. A scholarly debate continues around whether Hugin and Munin are literal birds or personified fragments of Odin himself. Some argue they are projections of his soul, spiritual echoes given feather and will. Others see them as shamanic spirits, familiars in a larger cosmic journey. You watch him now, this god with his wolves and his eye, and his 2 long silences. He does not pace. He does not shout. He waits. Because Odin doesn't need to act immediately. He needs to know. And every evening, as the ravens return, he knows a little more than he did the day before. Sometimes it's a whisper of war. Sometimes a lost rune. Sometimes just a song sung wrong in a village deep in the snow. But each piece matters. Because Odin isn't the god of answers. He's the god of asking better questions. And with ravens like these, he always knows what he isn't supposed to know. You step back now, the feathered flight fading from your bones. The fire crackles again. Prometheus stirs on his rock just slightly, and a single black feather drifts from the sky, landing on a scorched piece of granite far to the south. The eagle hasn't seen it yet, but it will. And then maybe, just maybe, memory will reach even him. The sky shifts above darker now, less twilight, more void. You follow the curling smoke of myth southward over stone cliffs and lightning-scarred peaks. The frost fades and the fire returns. Ahead, a figure bound in silhouette, unmoving, but never at rest. Because tonight, we visit Prometheus, the chained rebel, the liver regenerator, the titan who gave fire to mortals and was rewarded with eternal inconvenience by eagle. You approach the peak. Not Mount Olympus, not a temple, but a lonely crag, where nothing grows and nothing dies except one organ over and over again. There he is, naked, skeletal, defiant. His wrists are bound with iron that doesn't rust. His face is both proud and exhausted. And his side? Well, let's just say the eagle's not subtle. A mythological fact. In Greek mythology, Prometheus was one of the Titans, an older generation of gods who were overthrown by Zeus and his Olympians. But Prometheus sided with humanity, stole fire from the heavens, and gifted it to mortals. For this transgression, Zeus had him chained to a rock where each day an eagle would devour his liver. By night, it would regrow. Rinse, repeat. Forever. You watch the eagle descend, now wings wide, shadow stretched across the cliff face like a scythe with feathers. It lands with the indifference of bureaucracy. No glee, no pause. Just another day on the clock. The eagle begins its work. Prometheus doesn't scream anymore. He just stares straight ahead, lips barely moving. If you're going to punish wisdom, he whispers, at least do it with style. With a quirky bit of trivia, ancient dramatists, including Aeschylus, sometimes portrayed Prometheus as refusing to scream not out of stoicism, but to deny Zeus the satisfaction. One fragment reads, "He who gave mankind voice shall not give the gods a sound." You sit beside him metaphorically. The rock's too sharp, and you know the eagle thing. He notices you. "Let me guess," he says. "You've been talking to the old one-eyed wanderer." You nod. He snorts. He gets birds that return. I get a bird that snacks. You ask gently if he regrets it. The fire, the punishment, the sheer pettiness of cosmic consequence. Prometheus doesn't answer right away. He watches the eagle fly off, liver finished for the day, silhouette shrinking into the amber clouds. Then he shrugs, just slightly. They needed it, he says. Fire, memory, possibility. Something to set against the dark. He leans his head back against the stone. They always need something to set against the dark. A scholarly theory in comparative mythology suggests Prometheus represents the archetype of the culture hero, one who suffers for giving humanity the tools of civilization. Not just fire, but invention, language, astronomy. His punishment reflects the anxiety of progress that gaining power always comes with a price. You glance up. A single feather flutters down black, not brown. Hugin Munin. Perhaps one dropped it on their way past. Prometheus catches it. His lips curl into the smallest smile. Tell your Norse friend he says that he should have ducked before hanging himself on a tree. Not everyone has a rock to land on. You smile back, because jokes are the only thing sharper than chains. And fire. Well, fire's been burning in your pocket this whole time. The eagle vanishes into the distance, its wings slicing the air like the pause between God's decisions. You sit a moment longer beside Prometheus's rock, the stone still warm from myth and metaphor. Then the wind changes cold again, curling up from the north. You follow it not with your feet, but with your mind. Because tonight, we study the birds. Not just feathers and flight, but what it means to carry messages between gods and mortals, between punishment and prophecy, between memory and meat. And you rise, drift upward, and find yourself balanced mid-air, caught between a raven's black gaze and an eagle's bright hunger. Two birds, two symbols, two kinds of divine service. A mythological fact. In many ancient cultures, birds were considered messengers of the gods, raven and eagle most of all. The raven often appears as a bearer of knowledge, mystery, or transition. The eagle, meanwhile, shows up with judgment power and the scorching heat of divine authority. Odin's ravens whisper, Zeus's eagle devours. You float through a sky that doesn't belong to any one pantheon. Below you, images flicker Odin, seated on Hlidskjalf, his high seat, watching the worlds through raven eyes. Zeus on Olympus, his hand half-raised, a golden eagle poised at his feet like a loaded metaphor. A burning torch passed between stars, a liver regrown in silence. You hover. Then you descend slowly into a small forest clearing. Two stones sit across from one another. On one, a carved raven. On the other, a proud-beaked eagle. Moss climbs both, and yet the raven's stone is cracked. The eagle's is pitted, because knowledge wears down everything, eventually, no matter how divine. A quirky mythological crossover. In Celtic lore, ravens were also considered guides to the other world. In Native American traditions, Raven is the trickster creator-bringer of light. And in Christian iconography, the eagle becomes the symbol of John the Evangelist, carrying the word into the skies. Same bird, different sermons. You step between the two stones, now standing at the midpoint between black wing and gold beak. And you ask the question both birds answer differently. What is the cost of knowing? The eagle says pain. The raven says perspective. One burns, one broods. A scholarly debate explores this dichotomy in divine symbolism. Is the eagle the pure judgment of heaven, while the raven is the murky wisdom of lived experience? Some say the raven sees too much. Others say the eagle sees only what it wants to punish. You glance upward. A shadow passes. You can't tell which bird it is, only that it's watching. And then you smile, because they're both watching. They always have been. Prometheus on his cliff, Odin on his throne, feathers falling across pantheons. You step away from the stones, now your breath fogging lightly. In the distance, something calls. Not a squawk, not a scream. Something in between. Something that sounds a little too clever to be coincidence. And you follow it because the next part of the story waits on a branch you haven't seen yet. You push through a curtain of trees, bare branches brushing your shoulders like the fingers of stories trying to tug you back. But you keep moving forward toward the faint shimmer in the distance, like starlight tangled in bark. Because tonight you arrive at the foot of a tree that holds the world. And there, half suspended between root and rune, hangs a one-eyed god who volunteered for suffering just to learn what no one else dared ask. This is the day Odin hanged himself. And yes, on purpose. A mythological fact. According to Norse myth, in the Havamal, Odin sacrificed himself by hanging from the branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree. For 9 nights, without food or drink, pierced by a spear, he dangled between life and death. His goal: to gain the knowledge of runes, powerful symbols that could bend reality and fate. You step into the roots of the tree. They curl like giant limbs, each one inscribed with languages you don't quite know but absolutely recognize. Here lies Urd, where fate is watered. Here lies Mimir, whose well demands a price. Here lies Odin, upside down, whispering riddles to no one. You look up and see him. He doesn't struggle. His eye, just one, now meets yours calmly. "You're late," he says. Then, so was I. A quirky tradition in poetic Eddas claims that Odin did not scream, cry, or curse during his hanging. Instead, he spoke in riddles to the roots of the world, daring them to yield. When the runes finally revealed themselves, they didn't offer comfort. They offered understanding, the dangerous kind. You step closer. His voice reaches you faint but sharp as frost, runes you must find, and meaningful staves that the mighty sage stained and colored, that the great gods made, and Odin carved. He chuckles. "Self-inflicted prophecy," he mutters. "That's the only kind that sticks." And the wind shifts. You feel the hum of the tree under your feet. Not just life, but knowing. Each branch a possibility. Each leaf a secret. Each knot a question you haven't earned the answer to. A scholarly theory suggests Odin's hanging is a form of shamanic death, a ritual descent into the underworld to retrieve knowledge and return transformed. Much like the Siberian shamans who fasted, danced, or entered trance to cross into other realms, Odin doesn't die in the usual sense. He surrenders, and in doing so, he changes. You step beneath the shadow of his hanging form. A single drop of blood lands in the snow. It sizzles briefly, then disappears. Odin speaks again. "You remember the Titan, don't you?" You nod. "Fire and runes," he says. "One burns, one cuts. Same message, different shape." He closes his eye. "I never envied the Greeks, but I understand their taste in punishment." A raven flutters into the tree. You can't tell if it's Hugin or Munin, but it leans down beside Odin's ear and whispers something too quiet to catch. His lips curl. Then, with no movement, no struggle, he falls. You flinch, but he never hits the ground. Instead, he simply fades. Not dead, not vanished, just elsewhere. And where he stood, well hung a single rune, now glows faintly on the bark. You lean in close. You don't recognize it, but you remember it. Somewhere fire crackles, somewhere an eagle circles, and beneath your boots the tree continues dreaming. The snow crunches gently beneath your boots as you move away from the world tree. Behind you, the runes fade one by one, like stars bowing out before dawn. A breeze carries a hint of ash, just enough to warm your throat with memory. You head south again toward firelight flickering on cave walls. Because tonight, we descend into a myth older than punishment and more human than gods usually like to admit. The moment Prometheus stole fire and the divine temper tantrum that followed. You step into the cave. No dramatic altar, no sacred pedestal, just a quiet recess in a cliff, the walls smeared with ancient soot. The air smells of kindling of charcoal and of something that still remembers lightning. At the back of the cave, a torch sits in a cradle of stone, not burning, but not cold either. You crouch beside it and listen. A mythological fact, Prometheus, whose name means forethought, defied Zeus by stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humankind. Fire represented more than warmth. It meant technology, independence, the power to cook, forge, and transform. Zeus, of course, was not a fan. His response, eternal liver pecking. But before the punishment, there was the heist. According to Hesiod and later Greek sources, Prometheus tricked Zeus twice first, by disguising bones as a sacrificial offering, then by smuggling fire possibly in a hollow fennel stalk, possibly with a smirk that could shatter divine glassware. You pick up the torch. It feels heavier than it should, like regret or foresight. A quirky interpretation suggests that Prometheus didn't steal fire to empower mortals. He stole it because he saw their potential and feared what they'd become without it. In some versions, he even taught them astronomy writing math. Basically everything that makes dinner parties awkward. You step back from the torch. The shadows in the cave twist, then settle. You imagine him tall, tired, triumphant, glancing over his shoulder as he exits fire, tucked under one arm, destiny trailing behind him like smoke. Outside the cave, the sky crackles with lightning, and on Mount Olympus, a throne is clenched a little too tightly. A scholarly theory points out that Prometheus's story is not just about defiance, it's about the double-edged nature of progress. By gifting humanity fire, he set them on a path of invention and destruction. Every forge is a promise, every spark a warning. You leave the cave. Behind you, the torch ignites for just a second, a flicker, then gone. But you've already felt it, in your spine, in your breath, and up on the cliffside you glimpse the edge of a shadow. A wing. Not raven, not quite eagle, something in between. You climb following the scent of scorched stone and second chances. And as you reach the ledge, you see them again, Odin and Prometheus. One with a bleeding side, one with a burned hand, both looking down at the same fire, now burning in the hands of mortals below. Neither speaks, because they don't need to. They've already passed the torch, and it's ours now. You linger at the ledge, the cold rock beneath your fingers still pulsing with the memory of stolen fire and whispered runes. Down below, humans huddle around flames, some boiling water, some forging blades, some simply warming their hands and telling stories that don't quite remember where they came from. Because tonight, we look at a simple but uncomfortable pattern. Gods don't like it when you share, especially when you share their secrets, their tools or their monopoly on celestial authority. A mythological fact. Both Odin and Prometheus gave humanity something they weren't supposed to. Odin shared wisdom through runes, through visions, through unsettling dreams that leave your teeth sore. Prometheus gave fire, literal and symbolic, the power to transform the world. In return, both received eternal suffering. One strung himself up. The other got nailed to a cliff with bird visitation hours. You step away from the ledge and descend a path worn smooth by myth and maybe goat hooves. It's quiet. Too quiet. So the wind fills the silence with a bit of side-eye. A quirky parallel emerges in myth after myth. Gods tend to freak out when mortals get too close to divinity. Fire dangerous. Knowledge forbidden. Apples definitely no. The theme. Here's a shiny thing. Don't touch it. And if you do, well, welcome to the Eternity Club. You reach a bend in the path where two trees have grown so close they've braided into one another, and carved into the bark almost lazily fur runes on one side, etched in charcoal on the other. You smile. Some human made that. Somewhere between frost and flame, between theft and thanks. A scholarly observation in comparative mythology notes how often divine punishment is linked not to malice, but to transference of power. When a deity gives mortals something sacred, it usually marks the beginning of a shift culturally, cosmically, or personally. The gift is never free, and the price is rarely paid by the recipient. You sit beside the trees now, letting their twisted branches cast long, strange shadows. And you wonder, did Prometheus think fire would stay in the hearth? Did Odin imagine runes would stay carved in stone instead of inked on skin and scribbled in margins? Probably not. But they gave the gifts anyway, because even gods know deep down that sharing is a kind of rebellion against decay. You get up, brushing bark dust from your coat. A feather lands near your boot. Black, with a faint golden edge. No one takes credit, but somewhere a torch flickers. And somewhere else, a raven coughs dramatically and changes the subject. Because the gods may punish generosity, but they also admire it when no one's watching. The path curves inward now, folding like a raven's wing, closing around you in a hush of pine stone and low wind that hums like breath through a bone flute. There are fewer landmarks here, just flickers, echoes, half-sentences from myths that overlap without asking permission. Because tonight, we follow shapeshifters, gods, and tricksters who wear feathers, steal torches, cross boundaries, and laugh softly when caught. You step into a glade where the air feels off. Not dangerous exactly, but mischief hums from the roots up. You're not alone. A fox watches from the brush. A raven blinks from a branch. And something invisible chuckles behind a tree. You've entered the realm of divine disguise, where Hermes, Loki, and Prometheus all try their hand at the same game. A mythological fact. Odin was a master of transformation. He wandered Midgard in many forms. Old men, beggars, wolves, birds. He practiced Seder, a form of magic usually reserved for women involving spirit travel and disguise. Prometheus, too, is a shapeshifter, in some versions able to move between realms, to know things before they happen, to manipulate fate with a smile. And then there's Hermes, the Greek god of thieves' boundaries and extremely inconvenient timing. The one who invented the lyre by stealing a turtle, and then lied so well that Zeus gave him a promotion. All three, Odin, Prometheus, Hermes, blur the lines between god and guide, rule and rebellion. A quirky motif floats through these myths. Stealing is sometimes divine. When a mortal steals, it's sin. When a god steals, it's usually a lesson. Raven steals the sun in Native American myth. Hermes steals Apollo's cattle. Loki steals, well, everything, including his own dignity on occasion. You sit on a stone shaped suspiciously like a mask, carved into it. No explanation, just an invitation. You lean back and look at the sky. It's harder to tell whose myth you're in now. The constellations flicker between Greek geometry and Norse pattern work. A long braid becomes a river. A thunderbolt becomes a spear. A scholarly debate surrounds whether these shape-shifting archetypes come from shared roots in Indo-European mythologies. Did Hermes and Loki evolve from the same ancient trickster? Is Prometheus a cousin to Odin in symbolic function, if not in blood? Or do all cultures simply invent these beings because we need someone to break the rules and still be forgiven? The fox steps closer. The raven caws just once, and the shadows deepen. You feel yourself shift, not your body, but your viewpoint. You're a bird, you're a god, you're a thief, you're a torch, you're all of them, for just a breath. Then it passes, and the forest opens again, as if to say, you may leave now. But don't pretend you're the same. You nod, because you know. You were never just watching. You were always a little bit raven. You step out of the glade, your shadow trailing behind you in a slightly different shape than before. Not longer, not darker, just subtler, like it's remembering something you haven't. The air grows wider now, less forest, more cosmos. The ground levels into mythic architecture. No moss, no twigs, just smooth stone and sky. Because tonight, you climb 2 ladders at once, one branching upward, the other rising in marble steps. Welcome to the intersection of Yggdrasil and Mount Olympus. One is a tree older than language, the other a mountain that thinks quite highly of itself. You stand at the base of both. To your left, roots thicker than towers stretching downward into wells and frost and serpents that chew on destiny. To your right, white steps winding upward toward a banquet of ambrosia and bad family dynamics. You take 1 step in each direction. A mythological fact, Yggdrasil is the Norse world tree, a cosmic ash that connects all realms, Asgard, Midgard, Hell, and more. At its base are wells of wisdom Norns who spin fate, and a dragon named Nidhugger who gnaws on its roots. In Greek myth, Mount Olympus is the seat of the Olympian gods, floating above the clouds, ruled by Zeus, and filled with thrones, storms, and passive-aggressive banquets. One is wild, the other orderly. One grows, the other reigns. You pause between them, a foot on gnarled bark and another on polished stone, and ask, what does a god see from the top of the world? A quirky contrast. In Norse cosmology, gods are part of a system. They die, they bleed, they worry. In Greek myth, gods are aloof, radiant, and occasionally fall down stairs, but never from grace. Odin sacrifices himself to learn. Zeus hurls lightning when disrespected at dinner. You climb both now, not literally, but in understanding. Mount Olympus is static. It has borders, politics, invitations. Yggdrasil breathes. It drops leaves into worlds you've never heard of. It drips time like sap. And if you lean in close, you'll hear it whispering riddles you won't solve tonight. A scholarly theory suggests that mythic architecture reflects cultural worldview. Greek structures symbolize hierarchy and perfection. Norse trees represent process chaos and tangled timelines. One builds temples, the other plants forests and calls them truths. You sit now between trunk and pillar. Above, a raven circles the canopy. Below, an eagle perches on a step carved with thunderbolts. They do not speak, but both look at you like they expect you to choose. You smile because you don't. You rest in between, because that's where the stories overlap, where fire and frost shake hands, where chains and runes take coffee breaks. You are the echo between mountain and root, and both trees bend slightly to let you pass. The space between mountain and root fades behind you, like a dream exiting through the back door of your mind. You walk now through open air as if myth has momentarily exhaled. The stars blink above, not in constellations, but in rune patterns and astrological puns only gods would think are clever. Because tonight, we observe the cosmos's most celestial pastime, petty divine drama. Specifically, the eyebrow-raising, thunderbolt-wielding grudge matches between Zeus and Odin, two old gods, who might not punch each other, but definitely throw shade across pantheons. You come upon a table, carved from basalt, burned at the edges, set for two. One seat is gold-plated and extremely extra. The other is old wood, worn from leaning. Zeus sits in the first. Odin slouches in the second. Both have goblets. Neither has wine. They're mid-argument. They've probably been at it for eons. A mythological fact, Zeus is the king of the Olympian gods, lord of lightning sky and courtroom tantrums. Odin, by contrast, is the all-father of Norse myth, ruler of Asgard, god of war, poetry, and highly inconvenient wisdom quests. Both are known for gathering power-hoarding knowledge and deploying birds when things get messy. They glare at each other now. Zeus. Control storms. Odin, I hang myself for runes. Zeus, I seduce entire bloodlines. Odin, I invent poetic meter with spilled mead. A quirky comparison, Zeus and Odin are both patriarchal figures, but their parenting styles differ wildly. Zeus begets demigods, throws festivals, and occasionally turns into animals to pursue courtship. Odin raises wolves, trades eyes for drinks, and routinely lets his children wander into apocalyptic wars. You sit nearby. You've brought popcorn. Metaphorical. Divine drama is gluten-free. They continue. Odin. I gave men speech. Zeus. I gave them lightning rods to protect them from you. Odin. You chained your own helper to a rock. Zeus. You welcomed a trickster into your house and gave him your last name. A scholarly theory floats nearby, sipping from an invisible goblet that both deities reflect a culture's relationship to power and uncertainty. Zeus is about control through force and judgment. Odin is about control through information and ambiguity. One throws lightning when angered. The other writes a riddle, turns into a raven, and lets you suffer for 3 winters. The gods pause. They both look at you. Then, simultaneously, Zeus. Who do you like better? Odin. Answer wisely. You stare at your popcorn, then at the sky, then at a feather that falls between them, neither black nor gold, but gray. They look at it, then at each other. And for a breathless, fire-lit second, they laugh. Not cruelly, not mockingly, just tiredly, anciently. Like two managers from different departments who just realized the intern called in sick again. You stand, bow slightly, and walk away. Behind you thunder rumbles. A raven caws, and somewhere under the table a faint spark of fire flickers, probably stolen. Again. The laughter behind you fades like the tail end of a storm. Not gone, just rolling off into another corner of the mythscape to stir up arguments in new constellations. You wander through the long grass of silence, where thoughts drift slower and shadows get politely out of your way. Because tonight, we follow the birds. Not the ones being poetic or predatory, but the ones being prophetic. Birds that whisper secrets. Birds that hint at futures. Birds that show up at exactly the wrong time and say exactly the right thing. A mythological fact. Across ancient traditions, birds are frequently seen as prophetic messengers. In Norse myth, Hugin and Munin deliver wisdom directly to Odin. In Greek myth, birds like ravens, doves, and especially eagles were used for divination, with augurs reading their flight patterns as signs of the gods' moods. A raven flying left meant misfortune. An eagle circling above, possibly a war, or at least a minor political scandal. You pass a clearing marked by feathers. Long white ones in a spiral. Dark gray ones stacked neatly by size. And in the center, a nest not made for eggs, but for omens. You crouch beside it. There's no bird, just a single rune scratched into the bark beside the nest. A Ansus, the rune of divine speech, breath, and communication. Coincidence? Sure, let's pretend it is. A quirky thread runs through many mythologies, the idea that birds know things before we do. In Celtic lore, crows predict death. In the Bible, doves deliver. In Chinese legend, three-legged sunbirds carry celestial heat. Even in folk tales, talking birds often tell uncomfortable truths right before someone makes a terrible decision. A rustle. You turn. A small bird, not raven, not eagle, not mythologically famous, hops onto a branch nearby and stares directly at you. You freeze. It fluffs its feathers, then chirps once in a tone that somehow sounds like you're being watched. And it hops away. A scholarly theory suggests that prophetic animals in myth serve as a narrative device for the unconscious, allowing messages to reach characters without divine interruption. After all, gods are busy. Birds. Birds are always available for delivery. You rise from the nest. A feather floats down and lands perfectly in your palm. It's black at the tip, gold at the base. You know who it belongs to. Or rather, you know who shared it. The line between messenger and message gets blurry, especially when the messenger is covered in shiny things and knows where you hide your doubts. You continue walking. And up ahead through the trees, you see it. A cave. Small. Half covered in moss. From within you hear soft wing beats, not flying, just breathing, like a bird that no longer needs to move to be everywhere at once. The cave yawns ahead, dark, quiet, almost shy about the mythology it's holding. You step inside slowly, letting the moss-lined walls close gently behind you. No torches, no glowing relics, just a soft echo, as if someone sighed here 1,000 years ago, and the rock is still working it out. Because tonight, we trace the punishments. Not the dramatic ones carved in thunder or law, but the long, looping sentences etched in eternity. Odin's sacrifice, Prometheus's chains, Loki's venom, Sisyphus's boulder, each one part of the god's favorite genre, cosmic overreaction. You crouch near the cave wall where shallow carvings flicker beneath your fingertips. A wing, a liver, a looped knot, a face half turned in agony, half in acceptance. A mythological fact. In both Greek and Norse traditions, punishment isn't always about justice. It's about story. Prometheus's eternal torment serves as a warning not to cross Zeus. Loki's punishment, bound in a cave with serpent venom dripping onto his face, keeps chaos on a leash, but just barely. Odin's self-sacrifice, while chosen, still inflicts suffering in the name of knowledge. You run your hand over one carving, a man tied to a cliff, a bird circling above a fire, flickering below. Then another, a man hanging from a tree, whispering secrets to roots that don't speak back. You realize something strange. None of these punishments are final. They aren't executions. They're rehearsals. Repeating cycles of pain and patience of transformation rather than erasure. A quirky observation. In myth, the worst punishments often come with the best material. Epics, poems, cults, tattoos. The more elaborate the consequence, the better the branding. Just ask Orpheus, or Cassandra, or that guy still rolling his boulder uphill for the 8th century in a row. You walk deeper into the cave. The air grows warmer, as if fire were once stored here, not a roaring blaze, but the steady breath of a defiant torch. On the wall, another image, a figure with antlers reaching into a flame. Not Odin, not Prometheus. Maybe. Both. Maybe a third story never told waiting to be invented. A scholarly theory in comparative mythology argues that these eternal punishments aren't just retribution, they're initiation rites. Suffering opens perception. Endurance becomes enlightenment. You aren't cast out of the divine, you're being refined for it. Slowly, grudgingly, with liver damage, you reach the back of the cave. And there it is. A stone basin, filled with something dark. Not blood, not ink. Shadow. You look in and see your own reflection. But it isn't you. It's someone mid-sacrifice, mid-cliff, mid-hanging, mid-flight. You're not the hero. You're not the god. You're the one watching who now knows a little too much to go back to sleep quite the same. You turn away. And as you leave the cave, a breeze flutters past your ear. A whisper. Every punishment contains the map to its opposite. You smile, because that sounds exactly like something a raven would say right before stealing your socks. The cave behind you exhales one final breath of mythic warmth as you step into the chill once more. The stars overhead blink in familiar rhythms, constellations you now realize might actually be punishment diagrams, cleverly disguised as bedtime stories. You walk a little slower now, because tonight we watch how old gods whisper into new stories, where ravens show up with scrolls, where eagles carry wisdom to hobbits, where rebel spirits wear wings in books, banners, and fan merch. We're not done with Odin and Prometheus. We've just adapted them. A mythological fact. Prometheus and Odin never vanish from cultural memory. They just change masks. In medieval Christian glosses, Prometheus becomes a shadowed warning about pride and divine rebellion. Odin, meanwhile, is recast by chroniclers as a demon, a king, or an unfortunate metaphor for pre-Christian awkwardness. But they keep showing up in folklore, in literature, in symbols we still can't quite explain. You step into a grove of statues. They're mismatched. One holds a staff topped with ravens. Another wears robes stitched with Greek fire. A third looks suspiciously like Gandalf cosplaying Zeus. You look closer. Somewhere in these sculptures, Odin's eye glints beneath a wizard's hood. Prometheus's liver flickers beneath a superhero's monologue. A quirky modern echo. In J.R.R. Tolkien's work, eagles appear as sudden divine intervention, a nod to the eagle that punished Prometheus, but reimagined as salvation instead of sentence. Meanwhile, Odin's fingerprints show up in characters like Dumbledore, Gandalf, even Doctor Who, all wandering knowers, partial liars, and deeply committed to helping mortals mess up gloriously. You sit beside a stone bench carved with wings. A small brass plate reads, "Memory keeps returning, even when asked politely not to." You look up, and sure enough, a raven is perched on the branch above you, preening, as if it's waiting for someone to finally get the joke. A scholarly insight in myth reception studies notes that the figures of Odin and Prometheus represent cultural fault lines, the pull between control and chaos, divine order, and personal agency. Every time history gets too loud, these characters return not as solutions, but as complications we find familiar. You whisper to the raven. Do they still talk about you? It tilts its head, caws once, and drops a folded napkin into your lap. It reads, "Yes, and we're listening too." You laugh softly, because apparently divine archetypes now come with stationery. You rise. Statues fade behind you like good intentions after a feast. The raven follows, or leads. At this point, the difference is ceremonial, and somewhere out of view, but not out of story, Prometheus sighs. Odin smirks, and the next myth gets ready to borrow a feather. You follow the raven now, not because it commands, but because it has that particular swagger of something that knows where the best stories are buried. It hops from branch to branch, occasionally glancing back to make sure you're still behind, then pretending it doesn't care. Because tonight, we let the myths cross wires. We imagine the gods met, not in battle, not in prophecy. Just in that cozy corner of the cosmos, where two immortals with matching grudges and slightly charred reputations can trade gossip by firelight. Somewhere between Olympus and Asgard, you arrive at a clearing. A fire burns. A jug of something vaguely fermented steams beside it. And there they are, Odin and Prometheus. Not chained, not bleeding, just tired. Their weapons are leaning against a tree. Their birds are off duty. Their expressions say, "Let's not talk shop." You settle beside them, careful not to break the mood. Odin nods toward the jug. "It's not mead," he says, "but it pretends well enough." Prometheus raises a cup. "Made it myself. Fire brewed." They drink. No toast. No need. A mythological curiosity. Though never linked directly in ancient sources, scholars have long noted the thematic overlaps between Odin and Prometheus. Both are cultural mediators, bridges between mortals and mystery. Both suffer voluntarily or semi-voluntarily in service of knowledge, and both are surrounded by birds who never seem to stop commenting on things. Odin squints into the fire. "Your eagle ever bring you news?" Prometheus snorts, "only of its appetite." A pause. Then they both laugh, one dry and wheezing the other like a twig snapping in winter. A quirky thought experiment sometimes floated in comparative literature. What would happen if mythologies actually intersected? If Odin and Prometheus met, would they duel or debate? Would they exchange feathers like business cards? Or would they just sit down and share a drink, bonded by the ancient fraternity of gods who got yelled at for being generous? You sip from a cracked clay cup left near the flames. It tastes like burnt honey and something vaguely illegal. Prometheus leans over. "Did your people ever thank you?" Odin chuckles. "Some carved my name into wood. Others forgot how to spell it." Prometheus nods. "Mine told stories about a rock and a liver and left out the part where I liked them." Silence again. Not uncomfortable. Just seasoned. The raven lands near the jug and dips its beak. They don't stop it. The fire crackles. A scholarly whisper from the depths of cross-cultural myth notes that every society invents a figure who breaks divine boundaries for the sake of progress, and then punishes them, and then canonizes them, and then wonders why it keeps needing new ones. Odin picks up a stick and draws in the dirt a plus equals. Prometheus stares at it, then adds a dot, then smiles. "You don't need to understand the equation. You're part of it now. The gods don't nod. They just notice you noticing, which is all they've ever wanted." The fire burns lower. The jug empties. The raven burps. And for a moment in the hush between pantheons, two gods agree on one thing. It was worth it. You sit a little longer by the fire, no words, no questions. Just the slow warmth of myth settling into your bones like embers into ash. The gods say nothing more. Prometheus leans back against a rock that no longer binds him. Odin adjusts his cloak like a man used to carrying centuries on one shoulder. Because tonight we end where stories do not finish. We follow the long return of fire of feathers of questions still flickering after the gods have gone quiet. The wind stirs gently. From the trees above, a feather floats downward, black, gold-tipped, landing on the rim of your cup, like punctuation at the end of a sentence that still invites interpretation. You look up. The raven's gone, but the echo of wing beats remains. A mythological fact. These tales never claimed to be linear. Odin dies and returns. Prometheus suffers and endures. Loki escapes and rebinds. Myths stretch like sinew across generations, tightening at each retelling. You glance down. The runes Odin scratched into the dirt are fading under the ash. Prometheus's cup is half full again, though no one refilled it. And in the shadows, something shifts. Not a bird, not a flame. Something familiar. A quirky final echo. In some folk versions, Prometheus's fire never stopped being stolen. It passed from hand to hand, becoming Candleforge pen algorithm. And Odin's runes. They didn't stay on bark or stone. They slipped into alphabets, tattoos, logos, dreams. You stand now, not because it's over, because the story has looped once more. The gods rise but don't say goodbye. They simply fade backward, back into frost and cliff, into myth and map, leaving you here, still warm, still thoughtful, still carrying something you didn't have before. And so, the fire burns lower. Its light no longer dances, but leans soft and steady, like the last breath of a story told just right. Around you, the forest hushes. The trees no longer whisper runes. The stars no longer blink like warnings. Even the birds seem to have curled into dreams. You lie back in the grass, arms folded under your head. The sky above is brushed with a wash of silver blue. No constellations now, just quiet light, like the last page of a long book. You imagine Odin's ravens curled in their roost heads tucked under wings. You imagine the eagle still circling but slower, now satisfied. You imagine the gods not gone, just resting. Somewhere a forge still glows. Somewhere someone draws a rune without knowing why. Somewhere a fire crackles in a home built on myth. You inhale, not deeply, just enough to feel the warmth in your chest, the trace of feathers, the echo of stories, and as your eyes close, you feel the whole tale settle around you like a cloak, not to weigh you down, but to carry you gently into the quiet beyond endings. Because even the gods sleep eventually. Even questions rest. Even fire becomes a sigh.